Good evening. Welcome to the first City Council meeting again, well, for the second time this year in the chambers with a small audience and welcoming everybody here, my colleagues. It's much nicer to be surrounded by people, several people. Veterans Day is on Thursday, so I have asked that Councilmember Ed Jones lead us off in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge. Hand on heart, ready, begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Councilmember Jones. He served honorably in the U.S. Army. Thank you for your service. And with that, could we please do the roll call, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Adam.
Here.
Councilmember Jones.
Here.
Councilmember McNamee.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Engler.
Here.
And Mayor Bill De La Pena.
Present. Thank you. We have no special presentations or announcements tonight, and so we will now go to public comments.
Madam Mayor, this is a time and place for public comments for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. And at this time, I do not believe we have any public speakers, but we are confirming.
Thank you very much. Then we will go straight to the consent calendar. Any items that my colleagues wish to pull? None? Then I am looking for a motion.
I'll move the consent calendar, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones moves the consent calendar. Please vote.
Are we voting orally or?
Yes, 1 second, please. We have a delay here. Madam Mayor, the maker of the motion, if I could get a confirmation.
Yes, I moved the consent calendar.
Councilmember Adam?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember McNamee?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Engler?
Yes.
And Mayor Bill De La Pena.
Yes.
And that motion carries 5-0.
Wonderful. So our next item is a public hearing. I'm opening a public hearing, and it will be presented by, well, first Madam Clerk will introduce it, and then our senior planner, Nizar Slim, will be presenting. Madam Clerk?
Hearing advertised as required by law is open to consider agenda item 8A, mixed-use project at 1872 Newberry Road. Timber School, applicant Daylight, Thousand Oaks LLC. Speakers are requested to state their name and community of residence for the record, and 5 individuals have presented speaker cards, and pursuant to council standards, each speaker will have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And so we have with us Nizar Slim, senior planner, and then available for questions later on will be our community development director, Calvin Parker, and additional staff. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. Thank you again, Madam Mayor, council members, and members of the public. The project before you is a request for a horizontal mixed-use project at the southeast corner of Newberry and Kelly Roads. Staff is recommending tonight that City Council adopt the Planning Commission recommendation to to accept Mitigated Negative Declaration, MND 2020-70279, in accordance with CEQA, and approve the following requests. One, General Plan Land Use Amendment, LU 2019-70504, going from commercial to commercial residential. Two, a zone change, 2020-70275, going from C2 highway and arterial businesses to specific plan 21. Three, a lot line adjustment, 2020-70272, reconfigure existing lots into 2 legal lots of record. Four, specific plan 2020-70276, to adopt SP 21 to establish development standards for the subject site. 5, development permit DP 2020-70277. This allows a new multifamily residential and hotel development consisting of 13 buildings, 2 of which are existing, 218 unit, 2 to 3 story apartment complex with a 120 room, 3-story hotel and adaptive reuse of historic timber school buildings. 6, oak tree permit 2020-70278, removal of 6 coast live oaks and preservation of 2 coast live oak trees. Also a landmark permit, LTP 2021-70289, to allow the encroachment of 4 California sycamores, and those are located off-site, and removal of 3 California walnut trees. And lastly, actually, or maybe lastly here, development agreement 2021-70273, to establish standards and community benefits for the construction of the proposed project, as well as phasing and timing of the improvements. So a little bit of background. The physical site itself is composed of 9.67 acre parcel. It's located at 1872 Newberry Road, which is the southeast corner of Newberry and Kelly Roads. It currently has the historic timber school and auditorium buildings and remnants of a maintenance yard. Generally, the topography is relatively flat. It's kind of level with Newberry Road, slants up or slopes up a little bit. The site transitions upward to the south, and that's approximately 16 feet. It does vary, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Southerly pad is approximately 8 feet lower than the homes to the south. And here's some additional history background. In 2011, the RDA went through a dissolution and granted the remaining bond proceeds to the city to be expended on qualifying projects. In 2019, October 8th, residential capacity allocation was granted and a general plan amendment was initiated by this council. Allocation, that included allocation of 218 units for the residential portion of the project and endorsed a mixed-use concept. In 2020, January 23, a pre-application meeting was conducted by the applicant, and in 2020, May 28th, applicant began submitting formal submittals or formal applications. This is just going to talk a little about the RDA funds. It was from the redevelopment agency, and the funds are public monies collected from local businesses. They do need to be used for public improvements or improvements that that are a benefit to the public. The developer is required to go through the city's 3 bidding prevailing wage bidding process. Per the development agreement, there is $3 million that would go towards relocation, upsizing, and improvements to the city's city storm drain, widening sidewalks on Kelly Road, going to be from 6 to 8 foot width, new street trees on Newberry Road within the city right-of-way, new streetlights on Newberry Road, and streetlights at the new entrance on Kelly Road, and new enhanced crosswalks at Newberry and Kelly intersection. I want to talk a little bit about the Planning Commission review that occurred a few weeks ago. The project process was as follows. There was a pre-screen procedure that the project went through. City Council approved the concept. It was followed by a pre-application review, plus a formal application. All these requisite steps being satisfied, the Planning Commission has made a recommendation to approve to the City Council. A little bit about the surrounding uses. As you can see in the diagram that I've displayed, there are residential units to the north of 101, also to the south of the site. There's commercial on either side, as well as a hotel to the east. Now a little bit about the project summary itself. As I stated originally, it's a total of 13 buildings, 2 of which are existing. They include the Timber School and auditorium. There are going to be 9 multi-dwelling buildings, 2 to 3 stories tall. In total, they are going to give us 218 units. 26 of those are going to be affordable. It also includes 1 pool house and 1 hotel, approximately 3 stories, and that's going to be about 110 to 120 rooms. In addition, there's going to be 2 publicly accessible plazas, and they'll be discussed further in the presentation, but they include the Timber School Corner Plaza and the Kelly Road Plaza. These are going to be a public open space. They are going to be quasi-public in that they're going to be privately owned and privately managed, but open to the public use as well as the residents on site. And this is just a picture of what the Timber School Corner Plaza would look like. It's going to have some hardscape, shade tree, and like I said, it will be open to the public so that actually people can walk in and around that plaza and between the buildings. This is what the Kelly Road Plaza will look like. You see here, kind of picture, there's a phantom image of 2 oak trees. Those are the 2 oak trees that are going to be preserved in place and also kind of have a playground built around them. A little bit about the actual buildings themselves and the amount of units. We did mention 218 residential units. The unit mix is as follows: 15 micro units, 29 studios, 89 one-bedroom units, 85 two-bedroom units. Of those 218, it's 26 low-income units, and those will be 9 two-bedrooms, 9 one-bedroom, and 4 studio and 4 micros. A little bit about the low-income units, just to kind of help qualify that. The low income does stand for 80% of the median, average median income in Ventura County. So these are some figures here that you can see up on the screen that give you an idea of what that income level is. And as I mentioned, there are 26, which is about 12% of the 218 units. Now a word about the Paseo network. These are a network of paseos that actually help to connect pedestrian circulation. They actually are larger than what we'd ordinarily see for sidewalks. They do offer additional gathering opportunities, and one can think of them as mini courtyards that actually connect the buildings. They offer better walkability and circulation, and staff believes they'll help to contribute to a better overall social health of the project itself, because it will allow more community. And here's just another simulated view of what the Paseo may look like in between the buildings. As you can see, there's ample space there for people to convene, and there is some benches and such. Also, just kind of keep talking a little bit more about the open space. The Paseos, along with the other open space amenities, such as the pool area, the plazas that I mentioned before, those are quasi-public, so they not only serve the public, but also the residents as well, and they are included in the common open space. And with this particular project, when we take a look at the open space that's being offered up here, it equals about 45,460 square feet of the site, so getting close to an acre there. Here's a little word about the private open spaces. These are private open spaces that are going to be private to the units themselves. They all are, like I said here, we have a kind of a breakdown of what these would be: 115 for the micro units, 130 for the studio, 120 square feet for the one bedroom, and anywhere from 165 to 180 square feet for the two bedroom. And these actually all exceed Thousand Oaks Municipal Code, which only requires 100 square feet minimum per unit. So they actually are all exceeding that. There is also a picture here of the rooftop deck. This rooftop deck is sort of quasi-private in that it is private to maybe a couple units that can have access to the roof, but it wouldn't necessarily be a common open space where somebody from a different building across campus would want to walk over and use it. But it's just a small, more intimate space, again, that's perhaps up on a roof or close to a couple units. And now we'll talk a little about the hotel. As I mentioned, it's a 110 to 120 room hotel, and it's going to be it's going to be situated on Newberry Road. This image here does show its relationship to Timber School, which is shown in the corner there, and the arrow does kind of show where Timber School is going to be, or is situated. So as you can see, there's a bit of a space between the two, so there's going to be a parking area there, and that's going to allow a little bit of separation so that the new hotel doesn't dominate the old historic structure. And as I mentioned, it's going to be about three stories and 35 feet tall. The architecture is a Mission Revival style. It includes similar roof styles, veneers that are going to match more or less what the Timber Schools is going to look like once they renovate that. We'll talk a little bit about that. Timber School, so rehabilitation and adaptive reuse of the two existing on-site historic buildings. And what that means is that they're going to be, again, refurbished and, well, improved in such a way that they can be reoccupied. The uses that are now envisioned are going to be low-impact uses, things like of an office nature, or there was talk of a museum or some kind of an exhibit. Perhaps, but low intensity type of uses, business uses, commercial uses that wouldn't require a lot of work to the building infrastructure itself. In any case, any work that's being done is going to be reviewed by the Cultural Heritage Board, and they'll oversee any of those projects, improvement projects, to make sure that they do adhere to the historic integrity of the buildings. Let's go further. Also now we'll talk about the architecture for the main buildings themselves. I mentioned Mission Revival before, and they also have the same kind of continuity in architectural style. Some of the key features would include stucco, stone accents, boosted clay tile roofing, multi-pane pane windows, trellises, and other sort of features that would help to reduce the mass of the building by adding some visual interest. And as I mentioned earlier, the materials and design will also complement the Timber School architecture as well. And this is just to reiterate the mission style. This is a simulated view of the interior apartments. It should be noted that the style and the treatment, the architectural treatment and quality is going to be carried throughout the entire project, so that the interior of the buildings will also have that visual interest and visual architectural quality, not just the buildings that you'd see from the public. This is just important, I think, speaks to the quality of the project itself. Also, it adds the visual interest for those paseos that I mentioned, because if you're going to have a paseo or a courtyard situation in between the buildings, it would be appropriate to have architecturally interesting buildings, and that's being done here. A little word about the parking. There are 3 subterranean, what I call daylight garage structures. They have a portion of them that do come up above the ground, 3 or 4 feet. And they will actually house 277 stalls. They do allow, because they are subterranean, they do allow more amenities on the surface. The paseos is an example as well. The parking that's being provided is actually 554 total parking spaces, which exceeds the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code and the proposed specific Plan 21 by 19 spaces. Each also should be noted that each use or development is exclusively parked. That is, the parking that's being provided for the residential is located exclusively on the parcel for the residential portion, and the parking that's being provided for the hotel is exclusively located on that hotel parcel. So just a quick graphic here about the parking. You can see the table. I won't necessarily go through it. You can look at it for yourself. Just to reiterate some of the points here, it is 19 additional parking spaces over the standards for Thousand Oaks Municipal Code. The apartment buildings, I could do a little breakdown. Apartment buildings themselves are in excess of 12 extra units. The hotel and associated uses are parked at 2 extra units, 2 extra parking spaces, and Timber School uses are parked at 5 extra parking spaces. We'll talk a little bit about height. The commercial parcel, which is going to have the hotel, is going to have a 35-foot maximum height. The multifamily residential apartments are going to have a 45-foot maximum height. That height, though, is specifically reserved for buildings that are going to be furthest from the street and not abutting any of the residential properties to the south. So these are going to be more interior, So the perspective as seen from the public right-of-way will help to sort of lower the impact of the height of those buildings, since they are going to be central to the parcel. Structures on Newberry and East Kelly Roads will have an average maximum height of 35 feet. And the number of stories for buildings that are going to be located within 70 feet of the property line that's closest to the property line that divides the commercial property and the residences to the south. If they're within 70 feet of that distance, then they would be subject to a two-story max for the building mass. If they're beyond 70 feet, they can actually go up to 3 stories. This cross-section demonstrates what I'm talking about. It's a little bit busy here, so I'll kind of just walk you through it. There's actually 2 cross-sections here, and they start from Newberry Road, and they cut all the way down through to the southern properties, the residential properties off of Galway to the south. So if we take a look at the cross-section A and cross-section B, for instance, will cut through Building E. Cross-section A will cut through the hotel and through Building N, which is the building furthest, or I should say closest to the southern residential properties to the south. So if you take a look at the above cross sections here, that's what that's showing. There's a easier example to look at. That's this one right here. As I mentioned, Building N was one of the buildings that was actually closer to the residences to the south that we see here. And as you notice, there's a dimension line here that shows Building N at 66 feet and 6 inches. Because of that distance, that building mass nearest to the property line is now regulated to 2 stories. The building mass or the rest of the building that's beyond that can, of course, go up to 3 stories. And the other example here below, in large partial section of BB, we see Building J. Now, Building J is actually 86 feet and beyond, above or beyond the property line, and so that's allowed to go to 3 stories. One thing also that's noteworthy is the elevation differences between the daylight site and the residences to the south. There is an average, it does change a bit, but like I said, it averages from like 8 feet to potentially 13 feet. So having said that, given where the properties are located and the future planning of the vegetation that's going to be alongside the southern border, line of sight should help mitigate the line of sight and seeing the buildings. Next, we'll talk about the protected trees on site. As I mentioned, there were going to be some removals and some trees that are going to be preserved. For the oak trees, 6 California Coast live oaks were going to be removed, and 2 were going to be preserved in place, as I mentioned, on the Kelly Road Plaza. In addition, for landmarks, we have 3 protected walnut trees that were going to be removed, and 6 toyon trees that were going to be preserved. And I'll show you that in how it's incorporated in the landscape plan to follow. One thing we should note, though, and you may see this in one of the attachments, is that originally the 3 protected walnut trees were thought to be California walnut trees. City arborist, the consulting arborist did confirm that the report was accurate in calling that. However, the arborist, the author of the report themselves, went ahead and issued a correction in that they were English walnuts, in which case it would not have been protected. However, the applicant did elect to mitigate for those trees regardless of whether they were protected or not, so it became a moot point. And here, as you can see, this is the landscape plan that's being proposed. Those trees that are highlighted in yellow are going to be the mitigation trees. So there's going to be quite a few trees that are going to be planted in place of removing the 9 trees that I mentioned. And of course, you can see in pink, we have the preserved trees as well, the 6 toyons in the southern eastern corner and the 2 oaks in the Kelly Plaza. Also, as I mentioned, there was going to be some shrubbery that was going to be planted along the southern border. And that shrubbery, upon maturity, should be at least 25 feet tall, again, helping to mitigate the viewpoints from the residences to the south. In all, the landscaping is about 18,000 square feet, which again exceeds the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code of 10% coverage by 350%. Another way to put that is it's basically 3.5 times that. So at this point, staff would recommend that City Council adopt Planning Commission's recommendation and that they accept MND 2020-70279 and approve the project based on the staff report findings and subject to the conditions of approval in the attached ordinances and resolutions, attachments number 4 and number 5. That concludes the presentation. Staff is available for questions, if need be.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nizar Slim. Apologize for mispronouncing your first name. Since we don't have the mechanism yet in place for council members to push the button if they want to speak, would it be okay with my colleagues if I started out on the far right with Mr. Jones and worked my way down to the left? Is that acceptable? Okay. Mr. Jones.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Adam.
Likewise.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Engler.
May I have my colleagues' time? Is that okay?
Yeah, you can have them.
I cede my time to Mayor Pro Tem.
I was going to give them 1 minute each. No.
I think my questions really revolve around some of the things that we've been talking about in some other projects. As far as preparing this project for the future and kind of future-proofing it, are we looking at any type of solar or battery storage for the property? How are you addressing any type of electrical mandates that may be coming down from the state later, especially as it applies to automobile chargers and that sort of thing?
That's a good question.
If I may, Mayor Pro Tem. So at this time, solar is required for mid-rise buildings such as the ones proposed for this project. There are some exceptions to that, but they're extremely difficult to meet, in which case solar would have to be provided in concurrence with state law in that realm. In terms of moving towards electricity, EV chargers are required as a percentage of parking for all projects of this nature. So that's something that would be considered once this project moves towards construction drawings. At that time, we'll have a better feel for how much of the project will be solar. And just in general, in terms of gas versus solar, as we've discussed in numerous projects over the course of the last year, there's not currently a state requirement in the building code to require a project to be strictly electric. That is an option that's open to the applicant, and it's a choice that they have to make. And that may be something that you or the council may want to address specifically with the applicant when they have a chance to speak.
Thank you.
Mr. McNamee.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. I would like to follow up on the question that was asked by Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Bob Engler. It is about the solar panels. I recall in watching the Planning Commission meeting that it was testified or stated by staff that this project will have solar panels. And so if you could please clarify or restate that that will become indeed the case.
Certainly. And then so as it was mentioned earlier here, it is a function more of the building code than of planning. And it has also been stated, by the applicant that these buildings are going to be solar panel ready. So the roofs are designed to take on solar paneling. But if you want a more specific response to that, I would actually defer to our building official. Dragos, if he's available, you can go ahead and comment on the code language itself and what's actually required of new construction of this size.
And if I just may add to that answer, Madam Mayor, these are considered mid-rise buildings, and they are required to have solar per state law currently. So there is an option that the future developer could look at if approved to opt out of that. But that's an extremely narrow scope, and the restrictions are such that typically these buildings are built with solar in mind. So at this time, we do know that, as Nizar mentioned, that they will be built and spec to solar, but that is a building code requirement that we'll check when the project moves towards construction documents.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we do have several speakers. I believe we have 9. I will start with Tim Gallagher, who is representing the applicant, and then Mark Sellers will be available for questions, as well as the architect Brian Poliquin,
Poliquin, right.
Poliquin, thank you. And Lee Newman will be available for questions as well, Eric Sloan. And that is it for the applicant team. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, and we're going to save you a little time tonight. I'm going to speak, but those people will be here only to answer questions if we need to. You've seen this project before, so we won't take a lot more of your time. We're going to be brief. To briefly recap the benefits of this project, there are three. The restoration of the historic timber school buildings. They're going to be renovated back to their historic splendor and used by our community. The development of the apartment project, that's medium density, contains 26 affordable units. You've seen the design by our architect after consulting with city staff, and it's a very beautiful project. And the property owner did not ask for a density bonus, so this project has some space to breathe. And finally, development of a hotel that many visitors to the city's burgeoning biotechnology business would love to stay at. We've talked to many of those folks, and they're very excited about the development of this hotel. There are additional benefits for the city, and particularly for the Kelly Road HOA neighbors. Under this agreement, the developer will complete many of the public improvements that the city and the residents have desired in that area for years. As Mr. Slim noted, one of the applicants and I, actually you didn't note this, I'm sorry. Mr. Kaufman and I have met with the neighbors in the Kelly Road HOA at least 10 times over the last 4 years and have incorporated many of their desires into this project, including the sidewalks on Kelly Road, which have not existed on one side of the street, but will under this plan. Last thing we want to do is thank the city staff, especially Mr. Slim and Assistant City Attorney Patrick Hayer. They put a lot of long hours and dedication into this project. The discussions weren't always pleasant, but in the end we got to where we needed to be. And I think this is going to become a site that everyone in the city can become proud of. Also want to thank Rincon Consultants, who was one of our consultants on this project that did a fantastic job. And with that, we are available to answer any questions after we go through the rest of the speakers, I assume.
Question.
Sure.
Okay,
I
Mr.
may.
Adam.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Mr. Gallagher.
Yes, sir.
I'm taking this mask off. I think we can take it off when we speak.
Okay.
And you can too, actually. Very good. Yeah, a little clearer. Anyway, good evening. Thanks for being here. I like the breakdown of the unit sizes on the apartments. You know, you've got micro, studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. I don't recall seeing micro before, but I think that's probably good because I would assume that the pricing will be reflected on that micro and studio due to the size. The pricing will be less, obviously. So in addition to the 26 affordable that you're proposing, could you almost say that maybe the micro and studio would have some inherent affordability as well?
Exactly. You haven't seen that product involved introduced in Thousand Oaks a whole lot yet to this point, but I don't know how many of you saw the article in the Star on Sunday about the occupancy rate of apartments in our county.
Yeah, I
the
did.
Rents, they're going up. So these are done to deliver to the market smaller places, which many people desire at a much lower rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's beneficial. I mean, to get people housed one way or another, even if it's a little smaller, is better than the alternative.
And they do have that little patio area for most of those
Yeah.
units too.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem Engler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Gallagher and the Daylight crew. This is seems to be a good project that's coming forward. I appreciate the fact that you've taken into account some of the information and some of the comments that we gave you last time, and also in meeting with the neighbors, I can see how you've stepped the buildings back a little bit, 2-story rather than 3 toward the neighborhood. That's responsive to some of the things I heard the neighbors there saying, and I appreciate you taking those steps. In terms of the project, I think the last time we saw you here in Chambers, I think we were in Chambers then, there was some concern as to splitting the property, where you had the apartments being built, and at some point in the future, the hotel would be built, and we were I know from my perspective, I was very concerned that I didn't want to see a property, a second Kmart property on Newberry Road. What, can you discuss how you've worked this out with staff and how you're looking at that concern of mine?
Sure, I can give you an overall view of how we did it, and then if there are specific questions, Mr. Sellers could speak to those more specifically. But what we were trying to do was seek the flexibility, financial flexibility that the market conditions would allow us to separate those projects, build them both in a timely manner. Make no mistake, they want both those projects built just as soon as possible. But with the recovery from COVID, the hotel market is softer now than it was just a few years ago. And what the owners asked for was a little flexibility in the timing of the project so that they weren't put in a disadvantageous position when it came time to negotiate with someone to build the hotel. In other words, they didn't want the hotel builder to have a gun to their head saying, we know you need to sell this in the next 6 months or what have you. City gave a little, we gave a little, and I think we've come up with a development agreement that's fair to both sides and the neighborhood.
As I remember reading in the staff report, there was a 2-year window for construction to commence on the apartments and then on the hotel.
Mark, do you want to take it?
Yes, there's basically, we need to go with apartments in 2 years. The hotel, we're given a longer period of time, but I've been doing this a long time. And one thing I've observed over the years, when you have raw vacant land with no entitlements, you don't get a lot of calls from hotel operators. After tonight, hopefully if we get approval, that phone is going to start ringing. And our goal here is to build that hotel as soon as possible because we'll have entitlements that we filed for over 2 years ago. And generally no hotel operator wants to say, hey, I don't know whether I got a hotel or not and I won't know for 2 years, so call me when you get your entitlements. And that's where we are right now. And we want to get that hotel done as quickly as possible because that's financially beneficial to the owner. And what we have is a $3 million or $2 million penalty if we don't get the hotel started in 5 years. So that's our adverse response to not getting the hotel built. And again, we spent a lot of money for that vacant land, and the sooner we get a hotel going there, the better it is for our client.
Thank you, Mr. Sellers. Yeah, it sounds like there's a sort of a carrot and stick approach that there is some penalty if you don't get it done, but obviously there's some benefit if it's done quickly.
Right.
The other, I mentioned it in the question to staff about the solar requirements and the EV charging and that sort of thing for vehicles. I know that this building's lifespan is going to be easily into the, I think it was 2035 is when all vehicles in California are supposed to be, the new vehicles are supposed to be EV. Will you be exceeding or at least pre-plumbing some of those types of amenities that will be needed in the future?
Right, so as you heard from Mr. Slim, the rooftops will be prepared for the solar panels. The EV charging stations will be at construction permitting time. We'll be building to whatever the city code is at that time. But I got to say, this is a developer who has exceeded the parking requirements, exceeded the landscape requirements, exceeded the open space requirements. I think it's a safe bet that they will exceed whatever energy requirements, clean energy requirements the city has.
No, and I'll reiterate that I'm very pleased with the developer and how they've come to the city with this. It seems that that's something that you should be proud of.
Mr. McNamee? No? Okay. So good evening, Mr. Gallagher again. Just to confirm that the construction will be solar ready, obviously EV charging ready, and it will be up to whoever builds it to actually then install the solar system?
That's correct, to whatever the city code is at that time. So you'll have an
But it is a
opportunity
state
between now and then
requirement.
to increase
So
that.
it is a state requirement, so regardless of what the city code is, it can be stricter, but it will have to be installed. And I'm seeing that Mr. Parker is nodding his head.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. I would like to go to the speakers now who are waiting. The first one, I believe, is in the audience with us this evening, and that is Mr. Jackson Piper. You can approach the microphone. Is he here? Nope. Oh, I'm sorry. Is he?
I'm actually over video, so
You're
if you want to go with
over video,
audience
okay.
members first, go ahead.
Yes, Jackson Piper, you can go first via video, and then after you will be Rosanna Guerra, and then Tim Mcdougall, and I guess that all of them are via video. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, members of the City Council and staff that are present, and interested community members. I think that this will be a very good, I guess I should say my area of residence. I live in unincorporated Newbury Park. I've been here for a little over 30 years now, and I definitely am interested in seeing more affordable housing developed in Thousand Oaks and elsewhere in Ventura County because, I just turned 38 and I'm still living at home with my parents because I don't really see another option that's realistic for me right now. So, I think this is a very good project that will bring a lot to the city of Thousand Oaks. I think it sets a good aesthetic standard as far as the quality of the architecture. And it will provide, the 218 units, 26 of which will be affordable within the affordability categories provided by the state. And as Councilmember Adam noted earlier, it will also provide some inherent affordability in those smaller studio and micro units. So that's a good thing that I hope we see more of throughout Thousand Oaks, because not everyone needs a huge living space. Sometimes it's more important to have, a reliable roof over your head, a bed, a little bit of living space, and the ability to be able to live within this community and enjoy the advantages that it offers. So I think that this will be, a very good example going forward of what can be done in Ventura County and in Thousand Oaks in particular. I would prefer if there was additional units and additional affordable units, but I think as far as quality of projects that we have seen in Thousand Oaks, this is one of the top ones so far. I would definitely agree with the idea of incorporating solar and incorporating other sort of social and environmentally conscious elements to this project. I think that's a good standard as well, to have the pedestrian spaces, courtyards, and the public spaces provided, as well as solar readiness on the buildings. So with that, I will just ask the City Council to support and approve this project and let it go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rosanna Guerra, and then Tim Mcdougall, all on video.
Good evening, Mayor Bill de la Pena and City Council. My name is Rosanna Guerra, and I have been a resident of Thousand Oaks since 1993. Since that time, Thousand Oaks has made many significant changes. The demographics of our city, county, and nation has shifted as well, with an increase in the older adult population. With this growing shift, and in light of the recent census data, it is important for the city to look at any new development with this shift in mind. Housing must be viewed through the lens of how it serves the older adult population and the disabled. I am hoping that questions to any new developer answer, how does it meet the needs of our older adult population and the disabled? My hope would be to call upon developers to make accommodations by looking at how the city can make density more attractive to the developers. More older adults means an increased need in affordable housing due to fixed income. Is universal design part of the developer's plan to accommodate an older adult population and the disabled? And hopefully a segment of that development be assigned to older adults and the disabled on the first floor. And finally, has mass transit been consulted so that an additional bus stop or route can be added to create easy access to transportation for those who can no longer drive. Now, while I am in favor of this project, I hope that going forward, developers and the city look at this growing demographic before any additional, before it, any approval is done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tim Mcdougall, followed by Andrew Garl, and then Mitchell Schwartz, and I believe Mitchell is in the audience. Okay. Mr. Mcdougall, good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name is Tim Mcdougall, and I have lived here in Newbury Park for over 20 years. I love this community and the city staff. I thank you for putting this proposal together with the Planning Commission and all that's being done for our citizens and our guests. The Planning Commission has worked very hard to present this recommendation, and this would be a great thing to benefit our area. We know that there will be challenges. There's no question about that. But I hope you will agree with me that this may be the highest and best use of the land and our most historic public building. So I hope that you will vote in favor of this plan, and I'm sure that we can all work together to get through some of the challenges that may be ahead of us. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you, and congratulations on receiving this award from the Chamber of Commerce the other night as well. Appreciate that. Next speaker we have Andrew Garl, and I believe Andrew is joining us via video. Yes, good evening.
Good evening, council members and fellow speakers. I just felt the need to reach out and speak in support of this project. As a resident of Thousand Oaks, one of the unincorporated islands, and a young professional in the city, I can really appreciate the mix of housing that's being provided with this project. They've got over 200 units, which have a variety of from micro to 2-bedroom units, which will serve a variety of occupants. And also in support of some of the measures that the developer has used, some required, by state codes. As an architect here in the community, I have a little bit of insight onto some of the technical requirements that I can see, as Kelvin and others have pointed out, are helping mitigate the impacts on this project to the neighbors and enhancing the benefits to the community. And also, appreciate the city's willingness to work with the developer here. And as an architect who works on multifamily projects, can appreciate what the city has done here to make sure this gets built in the future. And I think that signals to other developers the environment for the city, and can appreciate that. But as a resident, the most important thing to me here is that this project provides an opportunity for a variety of people to call Thousand Oaks home, whether those are young professionals or college students or even seniors. Can really appreciate that this project could provide for all of those. And, that'll be it for me. I support the project.
Thank you. And our remaining speakers are in the audience with us this evening. Next, we have Mitchell Schwartz and then William Maple.
My name is Mitchell Schwartz, and I live in the neighborhood.
Mr. Schwartz, either is it possible to speak directly into the mic, and if not, then you may take off your mask because it's very muffled.
Thank you so much.
There we go.
My name is Mitchell Schwartz, and I live in the neighborhood directly south of the proposed project at the corner of Newbury Road and Kelly Road. As a 28-year resident of Thousand Oaks and Newbury Park, I've seen many changes. I've watched as the small-town feeling of living in Thousand Oaks has begun to erode, and hope that the City Council uses its powers to do the right thing and not let that happen. As you're aware, the proposed project at the corner of Newbury Road and Kelly Road calls for 218 apartments, along with a 120-room unnecessary hotel. I want you to think about that for a moment. 218 apartments and a 120-room hotel. Times have changed. It used to be that people could afford a one-bedroom apartment on their one salary. That's not the case anymore. Now the vast majority of renters need at least 2 salaries to afford their apartments. What does that mean? It means that there'll be a minimum of 2 full-time working adults in every apartment, with each person needing a car to get to and from work. This means there'll be a minimum of 436 cars just from the residents of the apartments. Add to that the cars from the unnecessary hotel, and now you have a minimum of 500 new cars on that corner. I call the hotel unnecessary because there are 6 hotels in walking distance of this location that are rarely completely full. Maybe a new hotel would be appropriate if we're planning on reopening Jungle Land or something. 500 new cars on that corner. 500 new cars. I'm going to say that one more time. 500 new cars. Picture that in your mind. 500 cars. And you know, maybe some of these people might actually have some guests. And where are they going to park? Are they going to park in our part of the neighborhood? Are we not going to be able to park in front of our own homes anymore due to this large influx of new vehicles? For everyone in the neighborhood south of this project, Newbury Road and Kelly Road, which is 1 lane in each direction, is our way in and out of our homes. This will destroy our neighborhood. This project is too big for this residential neighborhood. This project is too big for this residential neighborhood. With California finally beginning to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, does it really make sense to approve a new densely populated community with over 500 new residents in a relatively small area when it was the densely populated areas that were hardest hit by the pandemic? Imagine having 500 new cars on the corner of your block. Imagine the nightmare that the corner of Newbury Road and Kelly Road will be. You'll be destroying our neighborhood if you approve this project in its current form. It's not needed, it's not wanted, and it's not necessary. I've spoken with many of my neighbors, and they all agree that this project will really destroy our quiet neighborhood. You are the city council. Are you planning on destroying our neighborhood? If you approve this project in its current form, that's exactly what you'll be doing. I implore you to deny this project in its entirety. Let's not make the Conejo Valley into the San Fernando Valley. Do the right thing, deny this project. And remember, for 132 years, since 1889, when the timber school was built, this site has been a place for education. Can't we figure out a way to maybe continue to educate our children on this site rather than put this unnecessary garbage? I thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is William Maple, followed by Adam Haverstock. Good evening.
Good evening. William Maple, resident, Newbury Park. Things are so much more complicated now. I've sat in on some of the meetings on this topic, and it reminds me of the Eichler homes over there that were built back in the 50s, and the attempt was to build something low income, small, no frills, but aesthetically pleasing, something that people would actually enjoy. Those are going for about $750,000 now. And if you added everything that's being mandated from the state, from solar charging batteries, stations, universal design, density, I don't know how much those would be. I have 3 children, mid-30s, and they can't afford to live here. So I understand the fight, the design challenge to produce something that's affordable, meets all the mandates in the community wants. And you are our Cultural Heritage Board. I'd love to see the Eichlers as a point of interest, if nothing else. But you are supposed to meet proactively, look at what needs to be protected before it's either vandalized or lost. Tonight, you have a vote before you to preserve the oldest public building still standing in the Conejo. For more than a century, timber site served our community, including the founders such as the Hayes, Borchards, and Jantz family. As far as I know, it is the only two-room schoolhouse of its kind still remaining in California. It was built in 1924, or 40 years before TO was a city. It was designed by the first licensed architect in Ventura County, Roy C. Wilson. He also, by the way, designed some of the Jungle Land buildings, Thousand Oaks Landmark number 13, where we meet tonight. Landmark number 6 was the Dos Vientos Barns. Both of these are lost to us, long lost, and neither are good examples of meeting CEQA preservation standards. I attended the early meetings provided by Daylight representatives. One was hosted by the Conejo Valley Historical Society, and they were very open to the public. Unfortunately, the public doesn't attend. They don't get out and make their voices known early, not at the last moment when it counts. The representatives at Daylight listened patiently, as you are tonight, to resident concerns. City planners were present, and I believe they contributed to the discussion very constructively. I feel the planning department worked diligently to shape this project for the better. This project will not only preserve both landmarks, but more importantly, restore them for future generations. In less than 3 years, Timber will celebrate a century, a 100-year-old anniversary for this building, not the wood building, the site itself. Thousand Oaks will only be 60. After 2 miserable years of COVID, I hope the entire community will be able to celebrate in an open and restored Timber School. And just as lastly, it was Mick Ferris' diligent effort and paying attention on the Planning Commission that preserved this building as it is to today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Adam Haverstock with our Chamber of Commerce. Then we have Alessandro Neri, Danielle Borgia, and final speaker will be Chuck Lick. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor Bill de la Pena and members of the City Council. My name is Adam Haverstock, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs and Tourism for the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. We represent over 800 businesses in the cities of Thousand Oaks, Westlake Village, and Agoura Hills. And on behalf of the members of our chamber, I'm speaking in support of the Timber School project under your consideration this evening. This project will provide critical workforce housing for young professionals we need in our labor force. This is one of the few opportunity sites left within the city to build such housing. Building projects like these helps Thousand Oaks meet its RHNA housing goals while maintaining the character of our single-family neighborhoods to the benefit of local residents. Today, Haider Alawami, the city's economic development manager, made a presentation at the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors retreat. In his presentation, he discussed the many businesses that will be moving into the life sciences hub around Amgen in the Rancho Conejo area. Projects like this one will ensure that we have the housing needed to maintain the high quality of life we enjoy in Thousand Oaks while attracting high quality talent and jobs to the region. Please approve the proposal for this project at the Timber School site. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Alessandro Neri, and then Danielle Borgia.
Good evening, Mayor de la Pena and Council. I get that the developers want to add and care about low-income housing. I get it. But again, with the hotel situation, there are 6 hotels in that situation, in that part of the county. I myself want that Timber School to be reserved. Maybe if the developers could revise the plan without the hotel and make that land where the hotel is open space for the apartments and the low-income housing, then maybe I would agree with it. But I don't agree with it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker is the Executive Director of the Chamber, Danielle Borgia, and then a final speaker is Chuck Lick.
Good evening, Mayor de la Pena and City Council members. My name is Danielle Borgia. I am a lifetime resident of Thousand Oaks. also the President and CEO of the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of our Board of Directors in support of the Daylight Project before you this evening. This is a beautiful project. I love the architecture. That's going to provide much needed workforce housing for our young professionals and young families, while also allowing our major employers to recruit and retain this young talent that we really need to make our community thrive. Our major employers, including Takeda, Los Robles Health System, California Lutheran University, just to name a few, are consistently advocating for additional housing in Thousand Oaks to support their organizations. Our biotech sector continues to grow, now accounting for 15% of the city's jobs, which further elevates the critical importance of convenient housing options for these professionals while providing affordable housing for our community. The location will place more residents within walking distance of local restaurants and businesses, provide infrastructure improvements, and preserve the timber school buildings. I recently learned from my 91-year-old grandfather who moved here in the 1960s that my father actually went to timber school. In addition to the housing, the hotel will support both leisure and corporate travel for both our local biotech sector and our major employers. On behalf of our Board of Directors, I strongly urge you to support the project before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck Leck is the final speaker. Representing the California Association of Realtors, Simi Valley Moore
But speaking as a private citizen.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Chuck Leck. Kind of excited, an in-person council meeting, and you're allowing me to speak without a mask. Thank you. I speak in favor of this project. This is in a difficult area. It's right next to our main freeway going through town, next to a shopping area. It also requires a protection of one of our main city landmark buildings. And when completed, I believe it will absolutely dramatically improve this area. This project provides an excellent mix of housing sizes and therefore will provide a good housing mix of affordable rents. I believe this will be one of the most sought-after areas in the city by the young people working here and wishing to come and move here. In addition, it will also provide an alternative to those current residents who may not be able to keep their current large homes and are looking for something smaller without having to move out of our nice community. This site sits below the surrounding homes by almost 1 story, and therefore it's very well suited to minimize the impact of the projected building heights that we're looking at. There's 213 units, spaced out over almost 10 acres. We talked about the possibility of the hotel. The hotel's only going to be built if it makes sense to somebody to build it and to operate it. The layout also provides very reasonable spacing for all these units and very easy to get to parking. Protecting and utilizing the 2 remaining units of our locally historic timber school appears to be quite well handled by this project. Traffic is always a concern, but it will be mitigated through the agreement between the developer and the city, each bearing part of the costs. Traffic flow, I think, will most likely be improved once these improvements are made. All in all, the project appears to be needed, well-designed, both internally and for the surrounding area, and should dramatically improve the area in which it's going to be built. It is exactly the right type of project to improve that area. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you very much. This concludes the comments regarding our item, and I'd like to go back to staff to answer any of the questions or concerns which were raised.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'll begin in responding to some of the comments here this evening. In regards to universal design concept, that's something that we'll be evaluating in the future as staff. In regards to the hotel space and it's being necessary or not, hotel in this particular location would be in support of our economic development goals, as well as our economic base, our employers, and our burgeoning biotech sector. Along those lines, we also additionally have a need to provide housing to provide our fair share consistent with our arena numbers. In regards to bus and transit, there's currently an existing bus stop immediately in front of the site on Newberry Road. So this project will be served by TO Transit. And in regards to traffic and the cars, I believe there was a number referenced to 500. We do have a consultant available, Dennis Lambert. He's our traffic consultant on the project. And he's available via Zoom this evening, and he can speak directly to the results of his traffic study that was prepared for this particular project.
Thank you. Councilmember Jones, you were going to say something?
Yes. Got this tangled up in my glasses.
Happens to me too all the time with the glasses.
I understand that there are $3 million of redevelopment agency funds being used for off-site improvements. I was wanting to ask staff, how is the determination made of allocating RDA funds? And what will they be used for
the other one? Okay.
Specifically on, relative to this project?
So in regards to the $3 million, it is leftover RDA funds from a previous development agreement on site. Those funds can be used directly for public improvements or for the benefit of the public immediately in this area. In this case, that can take the form of improving the flood control easements and drainage, relocating sewer pipes and drains on the site, sidewalk improvements, street lights, street lamps, and other items of the sort.
So it's been previously intended for this area?
Correct, and the use of the funds has been clearly defined, and that is being carried over from a previous development agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember McNamee, did you have a question?
No questions.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Engler?
No questions. I have a comment for later if there's no other questions.
Okay. Councilmember Adam? Any questions? Okay, very good. I do have questions. Yes. I do get to ask questions every now and then. Regarding the Timber School. The Timber School was designated a historic building in which year? Maybe Mr. William Maple remembers that.
2004, Madam Mayor.
Oh, 2004. Okay, that's right. Mr. Maple was instrumental in this. We had formed an intergovernmental relations committee with the school district in order to come up with this recommendation in 2004, and it was a unanimous recommendation. So, I am really glad that this historic building is being preserved. Regarding the traffic, so my question was about traffic and parking, and we had Mr. Lammers available to us. I think he was on camera, and I wanted to see whether he could answer the questions that were asked.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good evening, Mayor De La Pena, members of the City Council. With respect to the number of cars on the site, and I think this was discussed already in the staff presentation, the parking requirements of the combined site, which is the community building, the leasing office, the hotel, and the units, the residential units, is up to 500 spaces. So one can expect 500 vehicles on the site. However, from a traffic analysis perspective, not all of these cars are always driving at the same time, of course. Hold on for a sec, I got to scroll up. With respect to trip generation, we used, of course, hotel with 120 rooms. In the morning, a hotel doesn't generate many trips. In the afternoon, it does a little bit more, but hotel rates from the ITE, so the Institute of Transportation Engineers, where the studies come from to develop these trip generation rates, estimates that there are 72 trips in the PM, of which half is in and half is out. So you'll see essentially 37 cars coming in and 35 going out. And with respect to the multifamily housing, that's any type of housing is well studied throughout California and throughout the US, and there's hundreds of studies, so those rates are well established. And for those 218 units, we have a total of 100 trips in the morning, 122 trips in the afternoon, and again, those are combined in and out. And all of the traffic, save for give or take 10%, is going towards the freeway and north of the freeway and to the commercial along Kelly. So we don't expect much traffic to be entering or going down south past the neighborhoods that are of concern. The traffic study showed that there were no impacts at the intersections, and that because of the location of the driveways on both the roads, Newbury and Kelly, we determined that there was a pretty well sparse distribution of traffic in and out, that it would not be considered an impact under post-project conditions.
Thank you. Then the next question that I have is, in the pictures and the schematics that we saw in the slide presentation, you had line of sight, which I found extremely helpful. And I don't see that being used all too often, at least not in council presentations, line of sight schematics. Is that something that we will see more often now that we're looking at objective standards? That is not directly related to this, but I was just curious.
Madam Mayor, that's something that we can add to projects going forward to City Council where appropriate. Obviously, in this particular instance, it fit the particular site due to topography, but that's definitely something staff can request from applicants.
Okay, very good. And I see that Mr. McNamee has a question. You're counting my questions? Did I do 3? Go ahead.
You have a wonderful time. Keep asking. It's okay. Are you done, Madam Mayor?
Let me just see if I'm done. For now, I am. We already had addressed the universal design, so thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Lammers, I have a question for you regarding the occupancy, number of people that will anticipate to occupy a studio and a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom. Do you have any numbers on those?
I do not. I just use the rates that are developed by our established sources, which is ITE and SANDAC, which is more local. And those do not provide specific numbers with respect to population. That's kind of a different industry. I just know, I'm just well aware of the rates of traffic, of trips that are generated by units. And multifamily housing doesn't really distinguish, so that the rates and the land use from ITE that we use doesn't really distinguish between 1 or 2 bedrooms. It used to be that they did a little bit more and they would separate out apartments and condos and all that stuff. And it turns out that the trip generation is quite similar. So they actually move back and develop new land uses, which is really just multifamily housing, which encompasses 1, 2, and 3 bedroom. And it's really about the height, and the height, of course, is related to where these apartment buildings would be built. Low rise up to 3 stories would be, similar to a setting like this, and then middle and high rise you'd see in more dense urban centers and in cities.
What I'd like to explore with you is the reality that I'm seeing in our community, and that the person made the comment earlier that it is costing more to live in an apartment, whether it be a studio, 1-bedroom, or 2-bedroom. And a studio years ago used to be for 1 person. Now it's more for 2 people, and a 1-bedroom, 2 or maybe 3, and a 2-bedroom apartment having possibly up to 4 people living there. And each of those individuals have a car. My challenge is that I've asked this council in the past to look at funding a study to find out what true parking demand is for future development. So we, as council members, have more data to ask the developer for a more specific number of parking spaces available. Because if we take 2 people for a studio, 2 for a 1-bedroom, and let's leave 2 people for a 2-bedroom, and each of those people have a car, I don't see sufficient parking at that location, and the parking will pour onto the street and into the neighborhoods surrounding the community. What are your thoughts of that observation that I just shared with you?
That is somewhat of a difficult. I understand the rationale. I have to, in order to prepare a study that is backed up by that is realistic, I have to use the rates that are available. Do they change? They do. And the ITE rates change every 2 to 3 years. Parking demand rates change too. There is a constant shift, of course, and now accelerated by COVID in and means of transportation. There may be more funding for public transportation in different areas, and the infrastructure bill is coming up. And then there, of course, is the component that many more people now at this moment work from home. And that may be, and it looks like it, somewhat more, not a temporary, but a something that is going to happen more and more in the future. So it's a little tough to predict what rates could be. And possibly if the city is amenable to it, there could be studies done in the city of Thousand Oaks for different land uses to see if to determine if the parking rates are still the current parking demand rates.
If I may add to that answer, Councilman, if you don't mind. So typically in planning, parking standards are standardized, and they use the ITE manual, which is updated periodically, typically every 2 to 3 years. That's the basis by which the parking standards in our code adopted by City Council was based. So being that I believe the last update was in 2019, we should be headed towards new standards and an updated approach to address some of the issues that you're raising in the 2022 cycle.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer, Madam Mayor. That was 2 questions. I'm going to give you my third.
Thank you. Do we have a backup plan should street parking become an issue in the neighborhood?
As with any project, when nuisances occur, whether it's parking or any other issue, we investigate through our code enforcement division if a substantiated complaint is filed. In this instance, I do want to point out that if a legal parking space exists on the street, that is available to the public. But if a nuisance is created by this particular project, it's something that we could attempt to address through the management company.
If I may, Mayor Bill de la Pena, as you probably know, in the instances where we've had things like this crop up, I remember in discussions with the Cohan project, for instance, there was some discussions around that. And when you start unpeeling that onion, generally what you find is garages that are filled and residents that are parking on the street, and thus a kind of a cascading set of issues. So as you begin to unpeel that, when we have neighborhood issues, that's usually the fact that we start to go down. And when you see that public parking impact, it's working with those HOAs, working with the tenants. But in this case, they're all leases that are on each of these parts, and perhaps the applicant can speak to those leases depending on the structure in terms of number of people that can reside, parking spaces provided, and so on.
That's correct.
Thank you. And Mr. Gallagher, go ahead.
That's correct. I mean, to Councilman McNamee's point, which is a good one, the leases that these residents will sign will limit the number of people who can be in those apartments, will limit the number of parking spaces available to them and cars that they can have on the property. The other thing I would say is, those of you who know me know I have a bunch of kids in this age range, and one of them lives with 2 roommates, and between the 3 of them, they have 1 car. The rest of the time, they use Uber and Lyft to get around. So, they're entitled to 2 spaces. They only use 1.
Mm-hmm. And Mayor, to be clear, the parking requirements have been met per our standards and in fact
yes.
have been
Yeah, yeah.
exceeded by 19 spaces.
Yes, yes, that was presented.
Just wanted
Absolutely. Mhm.
Be clear
Thank
on
you.
that.
So if there are no further questions of staff, then I will close the public hearing. Okay, the public hearing is closed, and we have Councilmember Adam, who would like to make a motion.
Yes, if I may, thank you, Mayor. Well, okay, let's take the mask off. Hey, I think there's a lot to like on this project. The list is quite extensive, from landmark preservation to proximity to the biohub, good design. We have a hospitality element. There's affordability. I like the fact that you have micro and studio in there. I think that's good. And we're going to activate $3 million in RDA funds. They're just sitting there dormant at this point. So here's a way to activate that. You've got the trees are being replaced on site. I like that too. No density bonus, all good stuff. And Tim, you made a mention of that Dyer Shearhan group about the rental market in Ventura County, if I may. Right now, over the last fiscal year in Ventura County, rates have increased 10.9%. Here in Thousand Oaks, it's 11%. And the vacancy rate here in Thousand Oaks is 1%. So in the last 25 years, this is the highest rent increases and the lowest vacancy rate we have ever had. And there's a lot that goes into that. Maybe landlords are kind of making up for the COVID stagnation that we've had. But right now, landlords want three times what the income is to qualify for an apartment. So, I get the economics of it, but it's really a question of supply and demand. We've got a huge demand, a low supply, that means high rents. And everybody asks me, it's too expensive to live in Thousand Oaks. We need to bring the prices down. The way to bring it down is to increase more supply. And that's what this project will do. Rent prices will decrease as demand softens due to greater supply. It's an immutable law of economics, and this is just one step to a formula for affordability here in the city of Thousand Oaks. So appreciate you bringing this forward. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that we approve 8A, I guess we can call it the Timber School project.
That would be 1 and 2. Recommendations 1 and 2.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Very good. Do we need to include anything regarding the solar panels in this motion, or Mr. Parker? I'm not supposed to be asking you questions, so you can give me hand signals or not. Okay, very good. I just want to make sure that we have that option, and well, not option, but actual requirement. Councilmember McNamee.
As I look at this project, it's definitely a corner, an area, 10 acres, that does need a great deal of help. I'm delighted that they're preserving the timber school for the historic purpose of it. My concern on the project is we have parking issues that go on here, and again, we don't have any real data or studies to verify how many parking spaces are needed for a studio, 1 bedroom, or 2 bedroom, and that will impact the neighborhood community there. Yes, we've met what the state requires, but as I find oftentimes in government is that it does not necessarily meet the needs of the community, because that may not be a standard that can be applied to Thousand Oaks. I'd like to compliment our city staff and the past leaders who have brought the city to a wonderful place where it is today. As we talk about supply and demand, it's because of this desirable city, its economic growth, its development, the quality of the people who care about their neighbor and their community is the reason why people want to live in Thousand Oaks, thus creates the demand. Can we meet that needed supply to lower prices? When you're 98% built out, that's very difficult to do. And I don't want to see the quality of our life diminish just to lower the price of housing. That doesn't make sense. But it's going to be a push-pull we're going to have to do here within the city to find ways in which we can help people live and enjoy the quality of life we've come to enjoy without overgrowth, making it look like the San Fernando Valley, which I'm very much opposed to, because then that changes the complexion and the nature of our city. We're going to have more people coming in because of increase in the biotech hub that we're creating here, as well as other jobs and industries coming to live in our desirable community. Yes, I believe this location will have more trips, but I don't think that's really going to impact the community. I think the local neighbors are going to feel more from the parking that's going to wind up on the street. And as we open up our economy and COVID abates, we're going to wind up with more people traveling to and from work, and more cars are going to be necessary to get to various places that they do have a job. People who live here in Thousand Oaks don't necessarily work in Thousand Oaks. And an average lifetime, 7 to 8 new jobs for an individual means they've got to go to Burbank, Glendale, so forth. They need a vehicle because we do not have a good regional transportation system here in the Southern California area. And that's a failing of Washington, it's a failing of Sacramento. But they look towards the local government to solve a regional problem, which is unfair to us. So with that, I'm going to vote reluctantly in favor of this project because I think it's much needed. It's a beautiful project. I don't know why you want to put a boutique hotel when there's so many others in the area, but I leave that up to the market and the developer to decide if they feel they can put in a beautiful hotel that will attract people and survive. That's their choice. It's their risk. That's what they want to do. More power to them. I'm not, as a government elected official, going to sit there and tell them how economically to spend their money or how to make a dollar in this marketplace. So I'm going to vote in favor of the timber school when it comes around to the vote.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Jones.
Yes, I like the project. I like all of the factors that the developer has taken in mind. I like saving the oaks and the specimen trees. I like the fact that he is not asking for a density bonus, which would further make it crowded, if it will be crowded in that area. I like the building setbacks, the fact that the periphery buildings, as I get it, are at a lower height, so they will not inhibit views of the surrounding hillsides. I like the affordable 16 units and the non-request of a density bonus, which obviously would not increase the crowding, as we've heard alluded to. And I like the quality of the architecture. It looks as if the applicant really has gone out of his way to have a very attractive and a very pleasing architecture look on these various buildings. I like the low profile. I think we would be showing the state, whose mandates I heartily disagree with, that we are making some progress in housing. If we need to, if we end up in court, I hope we don't, but this is a step toward increasing our housing by many units. So I think that for all of the reasons that I've mentioned and that the applicant has mentioned, that this is an excellent project. It's surrounded on 3 sides by commercial. So and the fact that the elevation is different than the residential just to the south, I believe that this will not impinge upon those residential houses. So I think all in all, it's a win-win project. So I intend to support it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mayor Pro Tem Engler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Anytime we are presented with a project, there's always a balance that we need to look for. Currently, we have a property that I believe has been vacant for around 8 to 10 years, if I remember right. There was a school there. That school has gone away. There was a maintenance yard there. That maintenance yard has gone away. Now it's a property that needs to be redeveloped. The applicant has said that they will preserve the timber school, the oldest school or oldest buildings in Thousand Oaks. That helps preserve some of what we have been in the past and brings it into the future for our children. The applicant also has come in and said that they will put 26 affordable housing units, and for me, being able to bring workforce housing to bear in Thousand Oaks is very important. Several of my colleagues have mentioned that the architecture seems to be something that is attractive. Beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, and but I happen to agree with them that the architecture seems to be something that is consistent with both the timber school and the area there. I do appreciate the fact that they will be compliant with our tree ordinances. There are some trees that will need to be removed, but they are replacing those trees on property at a 3-to-1 ratio. That's something that I think is a compliment to them and their ability to look at what is important in Thousand Oaks. I think the commitment that they've made now to future-proofing this project with taking into account future needs of electrical vehicles and other greenhouse gas sensitivities, I think I can trust this company to go forward with that as well. I appreciate the concerns of the neighbors for parking and perhaps traffic. That's on the negative side of the ledger. However, when I look at the balance of what this project promises to bring and the negative impacts in the area, I have to say that I would agree that this is a project worth going forward with.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Engler. And I too will support this project for the following reasons. First of all, it preserves a historic landmark, absolutely essential to the city of Thousand Oaks. It is older than the city of Thousand Oaks, and a lot of effort went into determining the historic landmark of status of Timber School, worth preserving. The architecture complements Timber School, so it is perfect, in my opinion. The fact that you are not asking for a density bonus is actually a good thing because it actually does reduce traffic and parking and the demands for additional parking elsewhere. Had you asked for a density bonus, we would really be looking at some problems regarding parking, but you have not done that. Also, you have are going to follow, or whoever purchases this, you're going to follow the state regulations and will provide solar, which is absolutely important in the fact that we will, this is part of the new generation of apartments coming into Thousand Oaks, thousands of apartments. And so we have to really be realistic about that. Supply and demand was mentioned. I'm sure these will be rented out in no time, but I like to use New York as an example. Supply and demand didn't really work out in New York City because you have tiny little closet apartments that are costing over $2,000 a month and are not really cheap at all, probably closer to $3,000. But nonetheless, it is a demand, and we do need to supply, and you are making that happen. So, and with that said, I will endorse the motion. Councilmember Adam.
Motion stands.
And now call for a vote.
Yes, please.
Let's vote.
Councilmember Adam?
Yes.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember McNamee?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Engler?
Yes.
And Mayor Bill De La Pena?
Yes.
And Madam Mayor, that motion carries 5-0, and I do have an ordinance title to read into the record. It's an ordinance adopting specific plan number 21, 1872 Newberry Road, and its associated general plan amendment, and authorizing the land uses and development standards in said specific plan. Applicant Daylight Thousand Oaks, LLC.
Thank you so much. And with that, we will go to the city manager, Drew Powers.
Thank you so much, Mayor Bill De La Pena. We will be back here next week with the Thanksgiving holiday the following week. Next week, we will have just 2 items, an update to our water conservation ordinance, an amendment to that to bring consistency with other agencies. We will also have an update from our Investment Review Committee, their annual report, and those will be our 2 items for next week, the 16th of November, and that concludes my update.
Thank you, and we will now go to City Attorney Tracy Noonan to announce closed sessions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have 3 closed sessions tonight, all of them pertaining to existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.98. The first one is Allison Piazza versus Tony Reveles. The second one is GI Industries versus City of Thousand Oaks, and the second matter is GI Industries versus City of Thousand Oaks. It is unlikely I'll have anything to report following these closed sessions.
Thank you very much, and this meeting is now adjourned until November 16th. Happy Veterans Day.